Natalie Rivers moved through the executive floor of Sterling Enterprises with the practiced invisibility of someone who had perfected the art of being overlooked. Her charcoal pencil skirt and crisp white blouse were chosen for their understated professionalism. Nothing that would draw attention or invite questions. At 29, she had spent the last 3 years as executive assistant to James Whitmore, one of Manhattan's most successful and demanding CEOs, and she preferred it that way. Quiet, unremarkable, safe. The morning sun filtered through the floored two-ceiling windows of the 62nd floor. Casting geometric shadows across the polished marble, Natalie arranged the files on James's desk with methodical precision. Her movements economical and graceful in ways she no longer consciously registered. Coffee at exactly 7:45 a.m. 3 sugars, no cream. Schedule printed and highlighted by priority. Contracts requiring signature flagged with color-coded tabs. 5 years of ballet training had instilled in her a discipline that translated seamlessly into corporate efficiency, even if no one knew where that precision truly came from. James arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, his presence filling the room before he even spoke. Tall and broad-shouldered with steel-gray eyes and dark hair touched with silver at the temples, he commanded attention effortlessly. He was 42, recently divorced, and wholly consumed by building his empire of luxury hotels and resorts. His interactions with Natalie were always brief and transactional, though never unkind. She was competent, invisible. Exactly what he needed? "Good morning, Miss Rivers," he said, barely glancing up from his phone as he strode past her desk. "Good morning. Mr. Whitmore, you're 9 o'clock with the investors. It's been moved to 9:30. Mr. Chen called to confirm the Tokyo proposal. And your mother left 3 messages about the foundation gala next week." James paused, one hand on his office door. The gala, right? He turned, fixing her with an appraising look that made Natalie's spine straighten involuntarily. "You'll attend as my +1. I need someone who actually knows what's happening and can handle the logistics if anything goes wrong." Natalie's carefully maintained composure flickered. Attending was one thing, being visible quite another. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore. I'll coordinate with your mother's assistant." The week passed in a blur of preparations. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, a glittering affair that would raise millions for arts education in underserved communities. Natalie helped coordinate every detail from the guest list to the entertainment, her efficiency masking the growing anxiety that coiled tighter in her chest with each passing day. She would be seen, photographed. The thought made her hands tremble. When she was alone, the night of the gala arrived with crystalline clarity. Natalie stood before the mirror in her modest Brooklyn apartment. Hardly recognizing herself in the midnight blue gown James's personal shopper had selected. It was elegant and understated, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt that moved like water. She had swept her honey blonde hair into a low chignon, minimal jewelry, subtle makeup, still trying to disappear, even in formal wear. The Plaza Hotel ballroom blazed with chandeliers and the sparkle of diamonds. Natalie remained at James's elbow throughout the cocktail hour, whispering names and details as needed, managing small crises with quiet competence. She could feel eyes on her occasionally, curious glances from people wondering who the unknown woman beside James Whitmore might be. But she deflected attention skillfully. Dinner progressed smoothly through the first 3 courses. Natalie had just begun to relax when James's mother, Catherine Whitmore, elegant and formidable in emerald silk, approached their table with a concerned expression. "James, darling, we have a problem." Catherine's voice carried the kind of authority that came from decades of running charity boards. "The ballet company we hired for the performance has had an emergency. Their principal dancer injured her ankle during warm-up. They're saying they can't perform the showcase piece." James frowned, his business mind already calculating alternatives. "Can they do something else? A smaller number? They're suggesting a reduced program, but it won't have the same impact. We promised the donors something special." Catherine's eyes swept the room with visible frustration. Patricia Morgan, Sterling's marketing director and a woman who had made no secret of her interest in James, chose that moment to interject from the neighboring table. "What a shame. Perhaps we could have some of the guests participate. Make it interactive." Her smile was sharp, calculating. She had noticed how much time James spent with his assistant lately, and she didn't like it. "I'm sure some people here have hidden talents." Maybe your assistant knows some party tricks? The comment hung in the air, barbed and dismissive. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt the familiar instinct to shrink further into invisibility. But before she could respond, James spoke, his voice carrying an edge. Miss Rivers is far more than an assistant, Patricia. Her skills are considerable. He turned to Natalie, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Though I confess I don't know if dance is among them. Catherine's eyes suddenly sharpened with interest as she studied Natalie more carefully. My dear, you carry yourself with remarkable posture. Have you had any dance training? The question pierced through Natalie's carefully constructed walls. Around them, conversations had quieted, attention focusing on their table. Patricia wore a smug smile, clearly expecting humiliation. The moment stretched and Natalie felt the weight of her past pressing against the dam she had built to contain it. Some, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. A long time ago? Well then, Patricia's voice dripped with false encouragement. Perhaps you could give us a small demonstration? Just a few ballet positions. I'm sure it would be charming. The cruelty of it struck Natalie like a physical blow. Patricia was attempting to embarrass her, to expose her as an imposter in this glittering world. What Patricia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Natalie had once commanded stages far grander than this ballroom. She had been Natalie Beaumont, principal dancer with American Ballet Theater, a rising star whose name had been whispered as the next great American ballerina before everything shattered. James was watching her carefully now, something shifting in his expression. Miss Rivers, you don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with. But Natalie was tired. Tired of hiding, of diminishing herself, of letting people like Patricia define her worth. 6 years had passed since the injury that ended her career. 6 years since she walked away from everything she loved. Maybe it was time to stop running from who she had been. She stood slowly, feeling every eye in the ballroom turned toward her. Her hands were steady as she reached down and slipped off her heels, the cool marble floor familiar beneath her bare feet. The room fell silent, hundreds of donors and society figures watching with curiosity and anticipation. Just a few positions, Patricia repeated, her smile victorious. Natalie walked to the small, cleared space before the stage, her posture transforming with each step. She signaled to the orchestra conductor, who looked confused until she named a piece. His eyes widened in recognition, but he nodded. The opening notes of Tchaikovsky filled the ballroom, and Natalie closed her eyes for just a moment, letting the music wash over her. Then she began to move. It wasn't just a few positions. It was a resurrection. Her body remembered everything, every technique drilled into her muscles through thousands of hours of training. She moved through combinations with flawless precision, but it was more than technical excellence. Every gesture carried emotion. Every extension told a story of loss and survival and unspoken beauty. She wasn't demonstrating ballet. She was dancing, truly dancing. For the first time in years, the ballroom had become a stage. And Natalie was no longer an invisible assistant, but a force of nature given form through movement. She executed a series of fouettes that left the audience gasping, then transitioned into an adagio that seemed to suspend time itself. Her arms created lines of poetry, her legs carved space into meaning. Her entire being channeled something transcendent. When she finished, landing in a perfect reverence, the silence lasted 3 heartbeats before the ballroom erupted. People rose to their feet, applause thundering through the space. Natalie opened her eyes, breathing hard, and found James staring at her with an expression she had never seen before. Wonder, recognition, something deeper that made her heart skip. Catherine Whitmore reached her first, taking both her hands. My God, child, who are you really? Natalie met James's eyes across the crowd, saw the question there, saw everything changing in real time. I used to be someone else, she said quietly, though her voice carried in the sudden hush. A long time ago. Patricia's face had gone pale, her scheme backfiring spectacularly. James pushed through the crowd, stopping directly in front of Natalie. Up close, she could see the intensity in his gray eyes. The way he was reassessing everything he thought he knew about the woman who had worked beside him for 3 years. Natalie Beaumont, he said slowly, recognition dawning. I saw you dance once, years ago. Swan Lake, at Lincoln Center. You were extraordinary. The name hung between them, a ghost made flesh. Natalie felt exposed in ways that terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. She had spent so long hiding, and now, in one impulsive moment, she had revealed everything. That person doesn't exist anymore, she whispered, though even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. That person had never really gone away, just learned to live in shadows. James reached out, his hand stopping just short of touching her arm, respecting her space even in this charged moment. Maybe it's time she did, he said quietly. And in his voice, Natalie heard an invitation to something she hadn't dared to want in years. Around them, Kala continued, but everything had shifted. Natalie Rivers, invisible assistant, had become visible in ways she could no longer control. And James Whitmore was looking at her as if seeing her for the very first time, seeing all of her, and not looking away. The dance had only just begun. The morning after the gala, Natalie arrived at Sterling Enterprises an hour earlier than usual. Hoping to avoid the inevitable confrontation, the building was quiet. Just security and a few early maintenance workers moving through the lobby. She rode the elevator to the 62nd floor with her heart hammering against her ribs. It's unsure what awaited her. The weekend had been a blur of anxiety and restless sleep. Her phone had exploded with messages from former colleagues in the ballet world. People she hadn't spoken to in years who had seen videos of her performance circulating on social media. The footage had gone viral, tagged with headlines like, "Mystery Woman Stuns at Charity Gala" and "Former ballet star emerges from retirement." Her carefully constructed anonymity had evaporated in a single evening. She found James already in his office. Unusual for 7 in the morning. He stood at the window overlooking Manhattan, hands in his pockets, his silhouette dark against the rising sun. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Whitmore, I apologize if my actions at the gala caused any embarrassment to you or the foundation," Natalie began, her rehearsed speech tumbling out. "If you feel my continued employment is inappropriate given the circumstances, I understand." James studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit, please." She obeyed, her hands folded carefully in her lap, every muscle tense. James returned to his desk, but didn't sit, instead leaning against it. Closer to her than their usual professional distance allowed. "I spent the weekend reading about you," he said quietly. "Natalie Beaumont. Principal dancer with American Ballet Theatre at 23, the youngest in company history. Critics called you a once-in-a-generation talent. You were scheduled to debut as Odette in a new production of Swan Lake when you disappeared." He paused. "What happened?" Natalie swallowed hard, the memories rushing back with painful clarity. "I was injured during rehearsal. A partnering mistake during a lift. I fell awkwardly and shattered my ankle. The surgeries helped, but the damage was too extensive. The doctors said I would walk normally again, even dance recreationally, but never at a professional level." "So you walked away completely," James said. "Not quite a question. Ballet was everything to me since I was 6 years old. It defined who I was, gave me purpose and identity. When I couldn't dance anymore, I didn't know who I was supposed to be." She met his eyes, surprised by the understanding she found there. "I couldn't bear to stay in that world as something less than what I had been. So I left, changed my name slightly, moved to a different city, started over as someone ordinary." James moved around the desk and sat in the chair beside her rather than behind his imposing executive seat. The gesture felt significant, equalizing. "You were never ordinary, Natalie. I should have seen that. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see. An efficient assistant who kept her head down and did her job." She smiled sadly. "I was good at being invisible. You were hiding," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, bringing them closer. "The foundation has received $200,000 in additional donations since Saturday night. People were moved by what they witnessed. My mother has been fielding calls from arts organizations asking if you would be willing to participate in other events." Natalie felt panic flutter in her chest. "Mr. Whitmore, I can't. That life is behind me." "Is it?" James challenged. "Because what I saw on Saturday night wasn't someone going through motions." "That was passion, Natalie. Pure and undeniable." His voice softened. "When was the last time you felt that alive?" The question hit her like a punch. She wanted to deflect, to rebuild her walls. But something in James's expression stopped her. He wasn't her boss in this moment. He was a man genuinely trying to understand her. Not since before the injury, she admitted. Dancing again? Even just those few minutes. It felt like coming home to a place I thought was lost forever, before James could respond. Patricia Morgan appeared in the doorway without knocking, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp. James, the Tokyo investors are online too? They say it's urgent. Tell them I'll call back in 20 minutes. James replied without looking away from Natalie. Patricia's jaw tightened. They were quite insistent. 20 minutes, Patricia. His tone left no room for argument. Patricia retreated, but not before shooting Natalie a look of pure venom. She's been with the company for 5 years, James said once they were alone again. Excellent at her job, but she's made her interest in me rather clear since my divorce finalized. I've never encouraged it. She sees me as competition, Natalie said quietly. Now more than ever, let me worry about Patricia. James stood, pacing to the window again. I have a proposal for you, and I want you to consider it carefully before answering. Her heart racing. The Whitmore Foundation is launching a new initiative to bring arts education to underprivileged youth. We're building partnerships with schools, funding programs, bringing in professional artists as mentors. He turned to face her. I want you to lead the dance component. Not as my assistant, but as the program director. The offer stunned her into silence. James continued, You would design curriculum, recruit instructors, work directly with students. You would dance again, teach again, be part of that world on your own terms? James, I don't know if I can, Natalie whispered, using his first name for the first time. What if I'm not enough anymore? What if I fail those kids? He crossed the room, stopping directly in front of her chair. You won't. And even if you stumble, you'll get back up. That's what dancers do, isn't it? She looked up at him, seeing past the CEO to the man underneath. Someone who carried his own weight of expectations and responsibility. Why are you doing this for me? Because Saturday night, I watched you transform from someone hiding in plain sight into the most captivating person in that room. Because talent like yours shouldn't be buried out of fear. He paused, his voice dropping. And because somewhere over the past 3 years, you became more to me than just an efficient assistant, and I was too blind to see it. The confession hung between them, charged with possibility. Natalie's breath caught. James... You don't have to respond to that now, he said quickly. Just think about the job offer. Take a few days. But Natalie, please stop hiding who you are. The world deserves to see you shine.
Out.
Over the following weeks, Natalie found herself caught between two worlds. She continued her duties as James's assistant while exploring what the program director position might entail. She visited schools, met with arts educators, and slowly began to reconnect with the dance community she had abandoned. The attention was overwhelming at first. Interviews, photo shoots, curious former colleagues reaching out. But James remained a steady presence, running interference when she needed it, encouraging her when doubt crept in. Their professional relationship evolved into something warmer. Late nights discussing program plans turning into shared dinners, business meetings bleeding into personal conversations. Patricia watched this development with growing resentment. She began making subtle comments to other executives about Natalie's past, questioning whether someone who had run away from her problems was qualified to lead a major initiative. She planted seeds of doubt about Natalie's stability, her commitment, her ability to handle pressure. The campaign came to a head during a board meeting 6 weeks after the gala. Natalie was presenting her proposal for the dance program when Patricia interrupted. I think we need to address the elephant in the room, Patricia said smoothly. Miss Beaumont abandoned a prestigious career without explanation. She's been hiding her identity for years. How do we know she won't simply disappear again when things get difficult? These children deserve consistency, not someone still running from their past. The room fell silent. Natalie felt blood rush to her face, the old shame and fear threatening to overwhelm her. But then James stood, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. Miss Morgan, your concerns are noted and dismissed. Natalie's past demonstrates resilience, not instability. She built an entirely new career when her first was taken from her. She has proven herself invaluable to this company for 3 years. And most importantly, She understands what it means to lose something you love, which makes her uniquely qualified to help kids who desperately need access to the arts. Catherine Whitmore, seated at the head of the table, nodded approvingly. I agree with my son. Miss Beaumont has my full support. Other board members murmured agreement. Patricia's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She had overplayed her hand, revealing her personal vendetta too, clearly. After the meeting, James found Natalie in his office, staring out at the city. You didn't have to defend me like that, she said quietly. It's only going to make things harder for you. I defended the truth, he replied, joining her at the window. Patricia crossed a line. She'll be formally reprimanded. She's not entirely wrong, though, Natalie admitted. I did run. For 6 years, I chose the easy path of invisibility over facing my fears. James turned her gently to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. You survived, Natalie. You found a way to keep going when everything you built collapsed. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary strength. Tears burned behind Natalie's eyes. I'm terrified, James, of failing, of not being enough, of losing everything again. Then be terrified, he said softly, but do it anyway. And know that this time, you won't be alone. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. James's thumb brushed against her collarbone, a touch so gentle it made her shiver. She could see in his eyes that he wanted to kiss her, could feel her own desire rising in response. We should probably maintain professional boundaries, she whispered. Even as she leaned closer. Probably, he agreed, his voice rough. But I'm finding it increasingly difficult to think of you as just an employee. I accepted the position, Natalie said. I'm going to be the program director. James's face lit with genuine joy. That's wonderful. Which means I won't be your assistant anymore, she continued, her heart pounding. Which means there won't be any ethical complications if we decided to explore what this is between us. His smile was slow and devastating. Miss Beaumont, are you suggesting we have dinner together? Not as employer and employee, but as two people who are interested in each other. I'm suggesting exactly that, Mr. Whitmore. James, he corrected, pulling her closer. When we're not in the office, call me James. Then you should call me Natalie, she breathed. And then his lips were on hers, gentle but sure. A kiss that felt like coming home and leaping into the unknown simultaneously. When they broke apart, both breathless, Natalie laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. For the first time in 6 years, she felt whole, her past and present finally aligning into something beautiful and new. Saturday night, James said, his forehead resting against hers. Let me take you somewhere special. No business, no foundations, just us. I'd like that, Natalie whispered, allowing herself to feel hopeful about the future. About possibilities she had thought were close to her forever. Outside the office, Patricia stormed past, her ambitions thwarted and her schemes exposed. But Natalie barely registered it. She was too busy looking forward, toward a life where she could finally be both the person she was and the person she had become. Supported by a man who saw all of her and chose to stay, spring arrived in Manhattan with unexpected warmth, transforming Central Park into a canvas of cherry blossoms and new beginnings. Natalie stood at the window of her new office, smaller than James's, but with a view of the park that took her breath away each morning. 3 months had passed since she accepted the position as director of dance programming for the Whitmore Foundation, and the whirlwind of activity had been both exhilarating and terrifying. The program had launched with 5 pilot schools in underserved neighborhoods, bringing professional dance instruction to over 200 students. Natalie had recruited former colleagues, built curriculum, and slowly stepped back into the dance world she had abandoned. More challenging still, she had begun teaching again herself, rediscovering the joy of sharing her art with young minds hungry for beauty and expression. Her relationship with James had blossomed alongside the program, though they remained discreet within the company. Dinners turned into weekend getaways, stolen kisses in empty conference rooms, late-night phone conversations that stretched into dawn. He was patient with her fears, supportive of her work, and utterly different from anyone she had ever known. Where her previous life had been consumed by competition and perfection, James offered partnership and acceptance. But today, standing at her window, Natalie felt the familiar flutter of stage fright. Tonight was the Foundation's annual spring gala. She had agreed to perform a full piece, choreographed specifically for the event. It would be her first complete performance since the injury. Her first time truly testing whether her body could still handle the demands of professional level. Dance. You're going to wear a hole in that carpet, a warm voice said from the doorway. Natalie turned to find James leaning against the frame. His suit jacket slung over one shoulder, tie loosened in the way she found unreasonably attractive. Even after 3 months together, the sight of him still made her heart skip. I'm terrified, she admitted. Abandoning any pretense of confidence, James crossed the room. Setting his jacket aside to take her hands, "Tell me what you need. Permission to run screaming from the building?" He smiled, that rare, genuine expression reserved only for private moments. Denied. But I can offer you this. He pulled a small box from his pocket, simple black velvet that made Natalie's breath catch. Open it. Inside, nestled on white silk, was a delicate necklace with a single pendant. A tiny silver arabesque dancer, frozen mid-leap. Natalie's eyes burned with sudden tears. It was my mother's, James explained softly. She wore it to every piano performance, said it reminded her that art requires courage. I want you to have it, to wear tonight as a reminder that you're not alone in this. Natalie couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. She turned, lifting her hair so James could fasten the necklace. His fingers were warm against her neck, and when she turned back, she pulled him into a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't. I love you, she whispered against his lips. The first time either of them had spoken the words aloud. I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid. James cupped her face, his gray eyes intense. I've loved you since I watched you dance at that first gala, maybe even before that, without realizing it. You're extraordinary, Natalie. Tonight, everyone else will see what I've known all along. The hours before the performance passed in a blur, hair and makeup costume adjustments, final rehearsal with the orchestra. Natalie had choreographed a piece to Debussy's Clair de Lune. Something emotional and technically demanding that would showcase both her artistry and her hard-won recovery. Her ankle, strengthened through months of careful conditioning, felt strong, but doubt still whispered in the back of her mind. Backstage at the Plaza, the same ballroom where everything had changed months before, Natalie paced in her dressing room. Her costume was elegant simplicity, a flowing white dress that would catch the light beautifully, leaving her arms and legs free to move. Her hair was swept up in a classic bun, her makeup minimal. She looked like herself, finally, not hiding behind corporate anonymity, but not drowning in theatrical excess either. Just Natalie about to dance. A knock interrupted her spiral of anxiety. Catherine Whitmore entered, elegant as always in champagne silk, her expression warm. May I come in, dear? Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. Catherine, please. The older woman settled into a chair, studying Natalie with kind eyes. I wanted to tell you something before you go on. When my son was young, he asked me how I knew if something was worth doing. I told him that anything worth doing makes you feel equal parts terror and joy. If you only feel joy, it's probably too easy. If you only feel terror, you're probably not ready. She smiled. What do you feel right now? Natalie considered the question honestly. Both. Completely both. And you're exactly where you need to be. Catherine stood, squeezing Natalie's hand. And for what it's worth, I've never seen James happier than he's been these past months. You've given my son something he thought he lost when his marriage fell apart. Hope. After Catherine left, Natalie sat alone with her thoughts for a few more precious minutes. Then the stage manager knocked, calling places. Time had run out. She walked through the backstage corridors on legs that trembled slightly, hearing the murmur of the crowd beyond the curtain. 800 guests, donors, press, people from her old life in the dance world, all waiting to see if Natalie Beaumont could truly return. The lights dimmed. The orchestra began the opening notes, and Natalie stepped onto the stage. The first few measures were pure technical execution, her body remembering patterns drilled into muscle memory over decades. But then the music swelled, and something shifted inside her. She stopped dancing for the audience and began dancing for herself. For the girl who had devoted her life to this art, for the woman who had survived losing it, for the future she was building with James her ankle held. Her body moved with the fluid grace that had once made her a star, but now tempered with emotional depth earned through suffering and survival. She didn't just perform the choreography. She inhabited it, telling a story of loss and redemption through every gesture in the front row. James watched with his heart in his throat. He had seen her dance before, had been awed by her technical brilliance. But tonight, he saw something more. He saw the woman he loved claiming back pieces of herself she thought were lost forever, refusing to let fear or injury or past pain define her future. As the music built toward the climax, Natalie executed a series of turns that drew gasps from the knowledgeable audience members. Then she moved into the final sequence, a slow, controlled extension that showcased both her strength and her vulnerability. She held the position, trembling slightly with effort, her face tilted toward the lights as the final notes faded. Silence. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then the ballroom erupted. People leaped to their feet, applause thundering through the space. Natalie stood in the spotlight, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had danced again, truly danced. And her body had not betrayed her. James was on the stage before she could fully process what was happening, pulling her into his arms, uncaring of the hundreds of eyes watching. "You were magnificent," he breathed into her hair. "Absolutely magnificent." Natalie clung to him, laughing and crying simultaneously, feeling more alive than she had in years. The audience continued their ovation, but in that moment, only James existed, his solid presence grounding her joy. When they finally stepped apart, James kept her hand firmly in his. He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying easily through the space. "Thank you all for your support of the Whitmore Foundation's Arts Education Initiative. Tonight, you've witnessed the extraordinary talent of Natalie Beaumont, whose dedication to bringing dance to underserved youth has already changed hundreds of young lives." He paused, looking at her with such love that Natalie's breath caught. "But I have a personal announcement as well." Natalie's eyes widened as James reached into his pocket and produced a small box. Everything seemed to slow down as he dropped to one knee on the stage, the spotlight catching the ring inside the box, a simple, elegant diamond that sparkled like captured starlight. "Natalie, you walked back into my life when I didn't even realize I was waiting for you. You've shown me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. You've made me believe in second chances, in the possibility of finding something real in the most unexpected places." His voice was steady, but his eyes shimmered. "Will you marry me?" The ballroom had gone utterly silent, 800 people holding their collective breath. Natalie looked at James, at this man who had seen her at her lowest and encouraged her to rise, who had defended her, supported her, loved her without reservation. She thought of the scared woman who had hidden for 6 years, and the woman she had become, someone brave enough to reclaim her art and her heart. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, absolutely yes." James slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that drew cheers and renewed applause from the crowd. Natalie kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into that connection, not caring who saw or what anyone thought. Later, after the gala had ended and most guests had departed, James and Natalie stood on the plaza's rooftop terrace, overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. She was wrapped in his jacket, the spring night having turned cool, her engagement ring catching the light from the city below. "I can't believe you proposed in front of 800 people, she said, leaning into his warmth. "I wanted everyone to know that I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you." He kissed her temple. "Though if you'd preferred something more private, I could propose again. I'll propose every day if you want." Natalie laughed, the sound free and joyful. Once was perfect. Terrifying, but perfect. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights. Finally, James spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "What happened with Patricia, by the way? I meant to tell you earlier." "She resigned last week," Natalie said. "Took a position with a company in Los Angeles. Your mother told me she helped arrange it. Thought a fresh start might be best for everyone. Catherine has a gift for tidying up loose ends." James smiled. "I hope Patricia finds what she's looking for out there." "I hope so too," Natalie agreed, meaning it. She held no anger toward Patricia anymore. She understood the desperation of wanting something you couldn't have, of feeling invisible while others shined. Have you thought about what comes next? James asked. After we're married, the program is thriving, but I know you. You'll want new challenges. Natalie turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with excitement. Actually, I have. I want to establish a scholarship fund for young dancers from low-income families. And maybe, eventually, start a small company that focuses on giving opportunities to dancers like me. Ones who had careers interrupted by injury. A second chance company? It's brilliant, James said, his admiration evident. We could make it a cornerstone of the foundation's work. We, Natalie repeated softly, loving the sound of it. I'm still getting used to that. Not being alone in my dreams anymore. James pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. You're never going to be alone again. Whatever you want to build, whatever mountains you want to climb, I'm with you. They kissed again, slow and tender, as the city hummed around them. When they finally pulled apart, Natalie rested her head against James's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, hiding from her past and afraid of her future. Tonight, she wore an engagement ring and had danced on a professional stage. She had reclaimed her art, found her purpose, and discovered love in the most unexpected place. The journey from shadows to spotlight had been painful. But standing here with James, Natalie knew every stumble had been worth it. Take me home, she whispered. James kissed the top of her head. Where's home? Natalie smiled, looking up at him with eyes full of love and certainty. Wherever you are, they left the terrace hand in hand, to people who had found each other against the odds, ready to build a future neither could have imagined alone. Below them, Manhattan glittered with possibility, a city of second chances and new beginnings. And somewhere in a Brooklyn studio, young dancers would arrive tomorrow for their lesson with Miss Natalie, never knowing that their teacher had once been lost, but had found her way back through courage, love, and the timeless language of dance. The story of the girl who stopped dancing had become the story of the woman who chose to dance again, and in doing so, found not just her art, but herself and a love that would last through every season to come.